Spotting deception is not always easy. It all depends on who's controlling the conversation. Let's look at tip number 76. Welcome back to 101 Tips for Interviewing and Interrogation. I'm your host, Stan Walters, and we're covering tip number 76 this time. Deception cues have always been identified as being very elusive and very rare, hard to spot. Now that has a lot to do with who is controlling the conversation. Let's consider a couple of scenarios into why, first of all, we miss deception and sometimes why we overanalyze and with preconceptions or confirmation bias, see deception, it's not there. Okay, first of all, if your subject's got a complete control of the conversation, now let's take this as an example. I'll be giving you a statement, there'll be no questions. Now, it doesn't always have to be that type of dialogue or announcement, but in those conditions, when the person is in control of the conversation, what do you think happens to any possible deception cues? Well, sure, if they've got any sense or intelligence about them, if they've got any deception awareness, they're going to steer away from those places where they're likely to get caught in deception, or they're going to try to gloss over them, or they're going to try to overwhelm you with a lot of details. So remember, look back about who gives most details. Another one of our tips, going back a little bit further, look at the whole series and you'll find it, about too many details. It's always thought that deceptive subjects give far too many details. In reality, that's not true. If you remember, we talked about that deceptive subjects give vague details, that the information is hard to pin down, it's hard to identify, that it's more chatter, it's more prattling than it is content. The markers there that we're looking for, so when we let the subject narrate, for example, there's a better chance there that you'll miss some of the deception or they won't be very pronounced cues. So during the narration, when you're working with victims and witnesses, you're gathering information, looking at the details that you want to further explore. But the same thing with the subject. Now here's what we're looking for. Remember we talked earlier in another episode that they'll engage in avoiding temporal and spatial information. So when it comes to specific times or length of times or times of day or kind of give you an idea of pinning down some form of time or length, then that's probably a good shot. Remember, that's their particular avoidance behavior. And deception at all is avoidance. So if you have a skip in time where they make a gap, then that's a place where you have possible deception. But that is very slight, rare cue. So you have to be really zeroed in and pay attention for it. The other one is when you have temporal information. Again, we talked about this just recently. When they leave out locations and people and places and are unable to identify that location. So that's typically a marker that place needs to be looked at. Now, when we make sure about this, during the narration, when you run a narrative interview a couple of times through, tell me what happened, show, describe, explain, and you keep consistently finding that same spot or 2 or 3 spots that have that missing information, on your follow-up, that's where you want to zero in. Now, when you begin to use very direct questions, very specific questions, and you narrow your Google search, go back and look at Google your subject, narrow your search and look for specific points and stay with those, now your subject is put on the line. And they've got to really work hard to try to suppress or to overcome those possible deception markers they may be generating. When that happens, that causes cognitive load. Now your deception cues stand out. Now they begin to become very evident because subject's having to work harder and your interviews are more specific, your questions, which is causing them to have to react or respond to that particular topic area. So do you see it consistently showing up in a particular point? So you know that there's a problem in that area. So this is the reason in your narrative interview, you don't just do one pass and then jump on the subject. You do 2 or 3 passes if you can, and you use different Googling tactics. You either look at different modes, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, or you look at time and reversing time. So you want to keep harvesting till you churn the information, if you will. When you're churning with your subject, victim or witness, you're actually going to get more data. The statements become clearer. So that's why a narrative interview is more conducive to not offending or putting off a victim or witness. It engages them even more and they're more anxious to give out the details. There will be places when they're going to be traumatized that they'll have difficulty with, and you'll find that as the interviewer. Then you can assist them through that point. So look for those spots. Remember that it all depends on who is in control on directing the interview or directing the conversation. Narrative lets the subject talk. Look for the identified points. Then in the cross-examination phase, begin to probe those areas and energize and churn those deception cues to the surface. Make sense? Good. If you will, please hit the share button at the bottom. I really do appreciate that. Again, I want to expand the program. Hit me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, so I can connect with you, keep you advised of other courses and other programs coming up. If your agency is doing in-service training or looking for specialized training that I use to customize for military or law enforcement intelligence groups, let me know. We can sit down and customize a program just for your personnel. But to do that, you're going to have to give me a call. So take a look at that and see if there's any way that we can help you in improving your victim, witness, and subject interviews. So the next time, until you see you for tip number 77, remember this is Stan Walters. Please be safe.